a psalm of David. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echzar binoteh sheyar bitzeni, almei menochot yenahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shmo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha umishantecha heme yenachamoni, taroch lefanai shocha neged sodorai dishanta v'shem enoshi kosirevaya. Hachtov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayar, v'shapti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. Please join with me in Psalm 23 in the English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach Yishem Adonai mevarach. The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We're gathered here this afternoon to express our deep abiding love, honor, and respect, and to say goodbye to our dear Ann Platt, who was taken from us this week. Our hearts are heavy with grief, and a veil of tears covers our eyes as we contemplate the loss of one who brought so much life and love and joy into this family and to her friends. But we're also comforted by memories of precious time shared, of love given. I'm going to call upon two members of the family to speak this morning and share reflections. First, Dana, and then Ivan.
Vus machst du? That's one of the choice phrases that my Grandma Ann taught me. When I was around 9 or 10, and the world was just too much for me, when I felt like my parents were nagging me and the school kid drama was out of control, I used to hop on my bike and ride to visit my Grandma Ann. I'd walk in the door to that cloud of soft white hair, and she would give me cut up watermelon and a hard candy from the little white cabinet in the kitchen, or Nestle's Quick. And I'd sit at the kitchen counter, and she'd cook something. I remember watching her make delicious kreplach, which I was endlessly fascinated by, possibly where I developed my love of cooking, or the smell of a half of a bagel, toasting, only half, because like me, she was endlessly on Weight Watchers. Or when Giddy met her for the first time, my husband, in Florida, and she brought him right into the condo, and she made him a hot dog, and he was thrilled. He was in heaven. At the counter in the kitchen, I would calm down. I would relax. Grandma Ann was very easygoing, very easygoing. Grandpa Dan would call me in the other room and say, "Who do you like better, your mom or your dad? Just tell me." And Grandma would yell from the kitchen, "Leave her alone." A true Balabusta, I remember the holidays. We'd sit in the dining room with the cousins at the kids' table. Cousins laughing and singing, indulging in a bit too much Manischewitz. The inevitable yelling and shushing from the grown-ups. Cut up dill pickles placed in bowls up and down the table. I remember going up to my grandma's room to take a rest in the sunny spot on her bed. I can still smell her green and white comforter and trying on her clothes from her closet. When she got her new car with movable seat belts, I asked her if I could have it when she was done. And she laughed at me, and she played That's Amore on the cassette player. And of course, our faithful walk around the neighborhood with Otis, who was attacked by another dog and died shortly afterwards. She always said, "Your father got that dog and dropped him off at my house." But she loved that dog, even though she put the plastic over the yellow sofa. I would anticipate my yearly trips to the condo in Florida, endlessly worried about the forecast. "Grandma, what's it going to be today? Sun?" "Oh, yes, don't worry. It will clear up. It will be nice." She was always so reassuring. Trips to the beach at Coolidge Street, sitting with all those magical characters like Reba and Saul and Magic Manny, Sammy and Joe, Stell, who seemed to never worry about sunscreen, who took on a deep bronze color that made them look so exotic. Listening to stories about the dog track and the racetrack, long walks on the boardwalk, hit by a wave of cool air when we got to the wall. Dinners at the Chinese restaurant at the table, the round table with ribs. I feel so lucky to go back there every year with my kids, and I protest wildly when my parents consider another area or a different condo. Grandma was always around, to my school functions, family events, parties. She always sat back. She wasn't shy, but she wasn't one for the limelight. When it was time for my bat mitzvah, candle lighting ceremony, we had to pick a song for her, "Wind Beneath My Wings." Did you ever know that you were my hero? You're everything I wish I could be. I could fly higher than an eagle because you are the wind beneath my wings. Last week, when we were home in Cleveland, I took my 3 kids to see Grandma Ann and Grandma Ann with Papa Ivan. She wasn't what she was when I knew her best, but my kids sang her some songs, we rubbed her hands, we gave her juice, and we met several ladies in the 90s in the hallway. They asked endless questions. Who are Granny Annie's parents? Papa, do you know them? And we heard stories about when Papa lived in the house below his parents. Does Granny Annie know we're here? Yes, I believe she did, and may her memory be a blessing. She will be missed.
Thanks to everyone for coming. Well, we wept as we sat with my mom in her final hours, listening to wistful songs. We spoke to her, held her hand, massaged her neck and shoulders, kissed her a lot. We were told she could hear us and felt so deeply the need to communicate with her, for at any moment she might no longer be here for us. Our mother, Ann Platt, was a caretaker. We wanted to thank her for raising us, for her unstinting love, a mother's unconditional love that can never be replicated. Yet she was also a loving daughter, wife, and sister. Her parents, Solomon and Rebecca Lieberman, Rebecca later became Bela, were Yiddish-speaking Russian immigrants. Solomon, or as we knew him as Zalman, courageously and alone came to the U.S. in 1918, and a few years later, as a carpenter, provided the means for his wife and their 2 oldest sons, Sam, who my mother fondly called Shmulek, and Eddie, who she called Shrulik. Shmulek, and Shrulik. Took a long time for me to get that pronunciation right. To join him in Cleveland. Leah Lieberman, which is the name that my mom has on her birth certificate. She obviously changed her name later to Ann. She never told us her name was Leah at birth, but it's on the birth certificate. So she came with an older brother. She and her older brother, Simcha, were born in Cleveland. Ann, the youngest of four and the only daughter, graduated from John Hay High School. She had excelled in bookkeeping and secretarial skills, but no doubt was expected to excel domestically as well. For me, two striking events in her early years illustrate her character. First, when she was about 14, she traveled by bus with her mother to California to visit her mother's sister. One can only imagine how she assisted her mother, who spoke only rudimentary English, to navigate across our vast country and then back home. Second, in her late teens and early 20s, she worked for her oldest brother, Sam, who owned a fruit and vegetable market. Though the wages were not great, she worked diligently and learned what it took to run a successful business. Ann married her beloved Daniel. He was 6 years older than her at 21 and had me at 22. I was known as a war baby, that is, a child fathered by a serviceman. Our dad fought in Europe for 3 years, and like others returning with him, were hot to trot. She had my brother Stan at age 25 and sister Shelley at 30, and hunkered down to help her husband make a living. My father's father had retail clothing stores and recommended to my dad that he go into the drapery business because the post-war economy was booming and lots of building meant lots of windows. The drapery business for my dad was uneven. In his first venture, he had a falling out with a partner. He then started a business all his own, but was a bit too exuberant about opening multiple stores. It didn't end well, but he was so resilient and determined, and he had a loyal, smart, and hard-working wife that encouraged him to keep going. Though this time he wouldn't risk brick and mortar. Instead, he would go to the customer's home or office, measure their windows, and deliver custom-made draperies. It worked, and we moved from East Cleveland, where we were in a two-family up and down, where my Zadie Zalman and Bubby Bela lived upstairs, to Beechwood, also known as the Golden Ghetto. So it was out of our Beechwood home that business was conducted. And as it grew, my dad invited his brother-in-law, Armin Reiner, and his other brother-in-law, Al Appistorff, to join the business. It was a dynamic team and a wild atmosphere. With UPS trucks and semis delivering bolts of fabrics and installation hardware, and with friendly salesmen dropping in to sell their wares, our neighbors who sometimes complained wondered what the heck was going on. All of our family members, Dan and Ann, our uncles and their wives, my dad's sisters, who also helped in the business, were kind, casual, hospitable, and really funny. And so our home became a magnet for our friends. It was a business, though it often felt like a three-ring circus. Truly, it was a wonderful extended family. And as teenagers, we had lots of people giving us advice. If you were to observe this scene from a distance, you would immediately see who held this daily gathering together. That's right, it was Ann. She cleaned, lots of cigarette butts. shopped, cooked, and kept the books straight and the coffee flowing. These tasks, of course, did not include her responsibilities for her children, preparing meals, doing homework. We didn't do much of that. Carpooling, I took a public bus to Hebrew school, disciplining and in general motivating us or trying to motivate us. For her husband, Daniel, she was always concerned, trying to insulate him from the pressure and tension of keeping the business solid. At age 46, he suffered a severe heart attack and not infrequently from then on suffered from angina pain. For good measure, add to this, when her mother began suffering from dementia, she took her into our house, that crazy house, and tended to her needs. None of this deterred Anne from carrying on. She kept the show on the road, and she did it flawlessly, selflessly, never complaining. Indeed, she was the adhesive that kept it together. In December 1983, 2 days after they arrived at their condo in Dania Beach, Florida, Daniel collapsed from a heart attack and died. Anne was devastated. She was only 57. By this time, in these circumstances, she might have retired but continued working in the business, though now she spent the winter months in Dania Beach. She enjoyed this routine for over 20 years until she was no longer able to live on her own. So we sit, riveted on her face, gaunt and tightly stretched, her eyes hidden beneath her lids, no longer accessible to us. Forehead, cheeks, ears, nose, lips, projecting sharp and angular. Her silvery white hair still lovely. Though her eyes are closed, she's looking up. It won't be long. She's angelic, waiting to join her hosts in heaven. All who came remarked how peaceful she is. And we thank her from the depths of our souls, and we convey thanks from those who are no longer here but would have appreciated the opportunity to say goodbye. It's been at least 12 years since the onset of the disease. It slowly consumed her. And as I and my siblings and our families accompanied her on this sad part of her journey, we realized that Anne had an exceptional capacity to adapt to her circumstances and an extraordinary will to keep going. With few exceptions, she remained calm, pleasant, friendly, even after she could no longer work. Sure, there were times when we thought, when is the good Lord going to take her? Yet we always appreciated her presence up to the very end. Regardless of her suffering, her goodness, her neshama shined through, and her absence will leave a huge void in our lives. We will always remember Anne, our mom, grandma, and great-grandma, Granny Annie, who bore this dreadful disease with dignity. She was an exemplary caregiver, and perhaps more importantly, she taught us how to graciously receive care. Above all, for as long as we live, her extraordinary strength of spirit will remain an inspiration to us. Thank you.
I want now to ask for Jamie and Stacy to come forward to share some words.
Hi. Some things that we remember about our grandma. some things that we remember about our grandma. Her laugh, her beautiful hair, her cooking. We loved her kreplach soup. It was our favorite, and every holiday we looked forward to that. And each winter, she let our family take over her condo in Florida. We'd come down there to Dania and spend a few weeks there, and these were some of our favorite childhood memories. We loved her friends and sitting on the beach and hearing all their stories. And really, what I most admire is the relationship my father had with her. We saw how much my dad loved her and put her on such a pedestal, and she passed down the importance of family, closeness, and a genuine love, which we're most thankful for.
Sorry, just one more. My Grandma Ann was a wonderful grandma. I will never forget how comfortable I was sleeping next to her in her giant comfy bed on Grandpa Dan's side of the bed. We must have been there very often, as my parents even today love to go out all the time. The house on East Baintree was a huge part of our childhood. I remember, like everyone else who came to the house, that Grandma would come down her long stairway, having just taken a bath and smelling like the baby powder that she used a lot of. We would sit at her bar stools in the kitchen while she cut up cucumbers and tomatoes for a salad, heated up soup on the stove, and popped frozen bagels in the toaster. Then she would ask, "What else do you want?" And I would always point to the freezer, of course, as she would always have ice cream with chocolate syrup. Then we would watch TV, water the plants, and look at her old photo albums. I love my kitchen now because it also has stools at the island, and I often think of Grandma Ann when I too have kids to feed. Grandma Ann taught us a lot of important things, like how to bowl. For her, bowling was a very important sport, and you had to practice. She played endless hours of gin rummy with us and took us to Jack's Deli for corned beef and chocolate phosphates. I will never forget every year how I felt finally making it to her condo in Florida, where she would pour us fresh orange juice and we would feed the ducks around the lake before we set off for Hollywood Beach to sit in the sand with her friends Sam and Joe and Reba and Saul. Sometimes we would ask, "Grandma Ann, why don't you go on a date sometime?" And she would laugh and say, "Are you crazy? I had my love and he passed." And then we would say, "Tell us the story." She would smile and would tell us this story. She would say, "When I was young, my dear friend Shirley said, 'Ann, my brother Daniel is coming home from the war. Would you like to go out with him?' And she said, 'Okay.' So he came to her house, and I think she lived up a lot of steps. He came up the steps, and he was wearing his black fedora hat, or it could have been gray. He tipped his hat at her and flashed his big blue eyes at her and smiled, and that was that. She loved him and always would, and he was a wonderful husband. And they had 3 wonderful children. Grandma Ann had a special love story. Thanks to you, Grandma Ann, for teaching us so much about everything and being such a good grandma. You will be missed."
So many beautiful and extraordinary memories. Thank you all for sharing them with us and opening up your hearts. You touch all of us very deeply with your love and your beautiful way of describing your relationships with her, how much she meant to each of you. Precious time shared. Our hearts go out to each of you. To you, Ivan and Roz, and to you, Stan, and to you, Rochelle. And to you, the grandchildren, Dana and Gidon, Shira and Michael, Helen and Jacob, Jamie and Alex, Stacy and Eugene. And to all the great-grandchildren, Tali and Leora and Sivan and Abraham and Ayla and Eden and Dylan and Ella. We know that you all loved Anne in life, are now left to revere her memory in death. We pray that God send comfort and strength to each of you, and that those beautiful memories that were shared and many that have not yet been shared bring you comfort and strength and healing in the days to come. The last chapter of the book of Proverbs is a beautiful poem in tribute to the ideal Jewish woman, Eshet Chayil. And I think of those words today as we pay tribute to Anne, because they embody so much of who she was, the way that she lived, what was most important to her, what she valued, and what she passed on to each of you. Eshet Chayil miyimsa v'rachok mipnini michra, batak ba'lev ba'ala v'shala lo yechzar. What a precious find is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and she extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. That's Anne. Describes her so beautifully. What a precious find is a woman of valor. Anne was very much a woman of valor. Good-natured and kind and loving and caring and very strong. Her husband puts his trust in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him all the days of her life. How true of Anne in her relationship with Daniel. How loving was their relationship and how good she was to him. How devoted. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Well, that's certainly true of Anne. She did oversee the activities of the household. The business that was run out of the house, with its circus, as Ivan, you described it, buzzing with activity, family members, workers, salesmen coming and going. And not just the business, but the family gatherings in the house. All the holiday gatherings that took place, all the times that you were together, and the gathering of all the friends. The watering hole she turned your house into so that all your friends would come to you. And this way she built a home that was always filled with love and joy and hospitality, a place that was buzzing with activity, a place that was very nurturing to each of you. And the poem goes on to say, she opens her hand to the needy and extends her hands to the poor. These words are also descriptive of Anne, who always invited everyone into her home and to her table. Her children come forward and bless her, her husband too, and say, many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. And certainly we've heard those praises from her children and grandchildren today. She was so devoted to each of you, so loved you, her children, and her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren. She took you everywhere, to Euclid Beach and Lake Platt and Twinsburg, and to travel in Florida. You shared how she typed your term papers. She typed so fast. And she gave you words of encouragement. And she supported you along with your dad through the drapery business. She slept you all over. She even fixed everything. She was the handyman in the house. And so many wonderful memories that you, the grandchildren, have, that you shared with us so beautifully today. So much love. The poem in Proverbs goes on to say, she is clothed with splendor and strength. And Anne had a great deal of strength. Ivan, you talked about how she took your mother on a trip across the country. And when she was even younger, she wanted to go to school in a Jewish neighborhood, to a Jewish school, so she would schlep all the way across town as a young child, taking 2 different buses in order to go to a Jewish school. And when your father passed away, she raised you and took care of her mother with such devotion and love. And even through these last years, through her struggle with Alzheimer's, she demonstrated her strength. She was a fighter with a very strong will to live and a strong love for family that shined through to the very end. Even the nurses, the caretakers, commented how strong she was, physically strong, mentally and emotionally strong, despite the affliction of Alzheimer's. And it's that strength that you have to always remember, that you all inherited from her. The poem ends, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-fearing woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. She was a woman, God-fearing woman, who had a love of her tradition that she passed on to you, that lives in you and in your children, and your grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. It's a great legacy. And her deeds do indeed speak her praise, because those deeds live on in each of you. She passed on her wonderful open hospitality, her generosity, her kindness, her strength. They all live on in each of you. You know, many people have the custom when you go on a date and someone gives you flowers, you take one of the flowers and you open up a book and you place it inside and close the book to press the flower. Many years later, you may come back and open up that book to look upon that flower, and when you do, the flower is all dried and desiccated. But is that flower dead? No, it's not dead. It's alive with the memories of experiences shared, of the depth of relationship, of the power of love. And so you take that flower and you hold it close and smell the fragrance that still lingers in the flower. Press it against your heart as you remember that love. And I say to you today, take all those memories that you have of Anne, of your mother, of your grandmother and great-grandmother. Press them to your heart. Hold them close. Let them nurture you and strengthen you, offer you comfort, inspiration, and guidance as she continues to live on through you. Our tradition teaches that though the body dies, the soul lives on eternally. And in another sense, she does indeed live on through you, through the gifts and the legacy that she's left to you. Family is a circle, and that circle has been broken, but you can heal that circle and make it whole again by taking the love that she gave to each of you and passing it on to each other. May her memory always be for a blessing. And we say together, Amen. Let's rise for the memorial prayer.
Eloah slichot, chanun v'rachum erech apayim v'rav chesed, Hamse kaporat pesha v'akrat yasha menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina. במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזורק ימסירים את נשמת חנליה בת זלמן ובלה שחל עולמה אנא בר הרחמים זכרה לה לטובה כל זכיותיה וציליות ככה בארצות החיים הובטח לה שערי צדק ויורה, שערי חמלה וחנינה, בסתר כנפיך הסתירך לעולמים, וצר בצר חיים את נשמתו. אדוני נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן.
God of forgiveness, you who are gracious and compassionate, patient and abundantly kind, we pray that you grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to the soul of our beloved Anne who has gone to her eternal home. O merciful one, we ask that you remember all the worthy and righteous deeds she performed in the land of the living. May she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Interment will follow at Zion Cemetery, after which the family will gather at Roz and Ivan Platt's home, 5235 Fairfield Oval in Solon. Following services and interment today until 8 p.m. with a service upon returning and again at 7 p.m. And tomorrow, Monday, 1 to 4 p.m. and 7 to 9 p.m. with a service at 7 p.m. Friends who wish may contribute to the Alzheimer's Association Cleveland chapter. Please remain standing.